Beyond the deep sea lay a kingdom called Canglan, ruled for generations by the merfolk. Beneath the rolling waves and endless blue, the strictest kind of hierarchy was hidden in plain sight. Among merfolk, the color of one's tail was destiny. Red, orange, yellow, green, cyan, blue, violet, silver, and gold. The brighter and rarer the color, the nobler the bloodline and the deeper the spiritual power. Outside those 9 recognized colors, pure white was seen as useless, a rejected shade that carried no spiritual energy at all. Black, on the other hand, existed only in legend. It was said to belong to the Lord of Guishu, the one who could devour all things. That day was the Canglan Empire's Grand Husband Selection ceremony, held only once every 100 years. Inside the deep-sea palace, coral formed the walls and luminous pearls served as lamps. Mermaid princes from every sea and distant realm had gathered in the hall, displaying their radiant tails before the 2 princesses seated upon the high dais. My name was Kangya, the eldest princess of Canglan. Sitting beside me, dressed so brightly that she looked like a blooming flower, was my twin sister, Shahua. Since childhood, Shahua had loved competing with me. Whether it was a robe woven from mermaid silk or a single water-repelling divine pearl, she always had to seize the better thing first. At that moment, she was looking at me with open provocation, her fingers stroking her long blue hair, which flowed like waves around her shoulders. In the center of the hall, the tail fins of countless young men refracted dazzling light through the seawater. There were princes from the blazing sun sea, with red tails like fire, nobles from the northern abyss with tails as blue as the open sky, and even a gold-tailed merfolk prince rarely seen in 100 years. His name was Liyuan, crown prince of the Golden Crow Sea. His tail glowed in the deep water like a fallen sun. Every scale gave off a golden aura so noble that the entire hall seemed to revolve around him. From the beginning, Shuhua's eyes had been fixed on him. She turned to me, unable to hide the pride in her voice. "Elder sister, since today is the ceremony, I won't stand on ceremonies. Prince Liyuan's golden tail suits me perfectly. You've always been generous, haven't you? I trust you won't fight me for him." I looked at her eager expression and almost laughed. Slowly, I shook the coral feather fan in my hand and said, "Since you like him, choose him. I have no interest in that blinding gold." Just then, my gaze drifted toward the most remote corner of the hall. Beside a huge bronze stone pillar, half hidden in shadow, a merman was chained. His tail was pure white. There was not a single impurity in that white, but there was also no visible fluctuation of spiritual power. Among all the brilliant colors filling the hall, he looked utterly out of place, almost pitiful. Heavy chains wrapped around his body. His head was lowered, his long silver-white hair covering his face, while nearby merfolk cast contemptuous and mocking glances at him. A servant beside me whispered that he was Launch, a useless prince from the extreme cold barren sea. Because he had been born with a white tail, his own people regarded him as an omen of misfortune and waste. If the ceremony had not required a full 100 candidates, he would never have been allowed into Canglan City at all. Shua followed my gaze and immediately let out a delicate laugh. She covered her mouth, but her voice rang sharply through the quiet hall. "Oh my, elder sister! Why are you staring at that white-tailed waist? Don't tell me your taste is so unique that you've taken a liking to someone lower than a slave. If you choose him, you'll become the laughingstock of the entire Canglan Sea." I ignored her ridicule. I simply looked at Launch. At that moment, as if he sensed my gaze, Launch slowly lifted his head. His eyes were clear as ice and snow, yet deep as an abyss. There was no humiliation in them, no pleading, no resentment, only a deathly calm. My heart suddenly trembled. It was a feeling that rose from the depths of my soul. In the unseen world of fate, a voice seemed to whisper to me, "Choose him. He is the one destined for you." On the high throne, my father, Emperor Gaian, cleared his throat. His majestic voice, wrapped in spiritual power, spread through the hall. "The ceremony is drawing to an end. My daughters, have you chosen your husbands?" Shuhua rose impatiently, bowed gracefully, and pointed toward the glittering golden prince. "Father, your daughter admires Prince Liyuan of the blazing Sunsea. I am willing to join with him in marriage and guard the borders of Canglan together." Liyuan smiled proudly. With an elegant swing of his brilliant golden tail, he moved forward and bowed to my father and to Shuhua. His tail stirred golden ripples through the water, drawing gasps of admiration from the merfolk around him. Father stroked his beard and laughed. He was clearly pleased with this son-in-law. Good, a golden tail for the Pearl of Canglan, truly a match made by the heavens. Then Father's gaze turned to me. His voice softened. "Kangju, what about you? Have you found someone you favor?" Under countless watching eyes, I slowly stood. I did not walk toward the noble violet-tailed princes or the silver-tailed heirs. Instead, I passed through the crowd step by step and went straight toward the cold bronze pillar. The whispers around me faded. Soon, the entire hall was silent, Shua's face lit with malicious delight. Liyuan's eyes flashed with disdain. I stopped before launch. The sea breeze stirred the hem of my dress. I reached out and gently touched his cold cheek with my fingertips. His body trembled slightly, but he did not retreat. Then I turned back to my father and spoke clearly, word by word. "Father, I have chosen. I choose Lancia of the extreme cold barren sea as my husband." The hall exploded into shock. The smile on Father's face froze. His brows drew together as he slammed his hand on the armrest and rose. "Kangju, stop this nonsense. He is a white-tailed merman. He has no spiritual power at all. Any children born from him will be the lowest kind of white-tail. You are the eldest princess. How can you degrade yourself like this?" Shuhua immediately added, "Exactly, sister. Even if you want to give way to me, there's no need to make a joke of your own marriage. If you marry a white-tail, how will you ever hold your head up in the imperial city again?" Liyuan gave a cold laugh and said arrogantly, "Eldest princess, I thought you were a woman of vision. I never expected you to be so self-destructive. A white-tailed creature has no right to stand in this sacred hall." Facing everyone's doubts and mockery, I remained calm. I looked at Father and said, "The rule of the ceremony is that a princess may choose according to her own heart. My heart is decided. I will not change it. If Father refuses, then I would rather never marry at all." Lanch stared at me in shock. Those eyes that had remained still as frozen water finally stirred. In a voice so low only I could hear, he said, "Your Highness, do you know what you're saying? I can't help you with anything. I will only bring you humiliation." I turned to him and smiled. My smile must have looked like the purest flower blooming beneath the sea. "I don't need you to help me," I said softly. "I only want you." Father stared at my determined expression for a long time. At last, he sighed deeply. He knew my temperament. Once I decided something, even 9 dragons could not pull me back. He waved his hand, disappointment written all over his face. "Fine. Since you insist, I will grant it. But if you suffer in the future, do not come crying to me." And so the ceremony ended. Shuhua and Liyuan's wedding was set for 3 days later. It would be a grand celebration that shook the 4 seas. Mine and Lanch's marriage, on the other hand, was arranged for that very night. There was no ceremony, no guests, not even a single wedding candle. That night, I brought Lanch back to my eldest princess residence. The estate was quiet, with only a few loyal maids moving about. The chains on Lanch's body had been removed. He had changed into a simple white robe and now sat silently on the edge of the bed. His tail had transformed into a pair of long, straight legs, but when one came close, faint white scales could still be seen beneath his skin. I carried a cup of calming tea to him and handed it over. He seemed overwhelmed by the gesture. When his fingers brushed mine, he panicked and pulled back so quickly that the tea almost spilled. Lowering his head like a child who had done something wrong, he said, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." I sat beside him and wiped the water from the back of his hand with a handkerchief. "We're husband and wife now. You don't need to be so cautious with me. Lunch, can you tell me why everyone says you have no spiritual power?" Lunch was silent for a long time. His hands clenched around the cup until his knuckles turned pale. Finally, he gave a self-mocking smile. "Because my mother was an ordinary white-tailed mermaid. She gave birth to me in the extreme cold, barren sea. That place is frozen and barren, with no spiritual energy to nourish anyone. I was born with a white tail. In my clan, a white tail is an original sin. We can only do the dirtiest, hardest work. Even breathing is treated like a mistake. I thought I would die in that barren sea. I never thought I'd be brought here. And I never thought your highness would choose me." I looked at him. Moonlight came through the window lattice and fell across his beautiful profile. His silver hair shimmered faintly in the night. For some reason, I always felt there was an extremely restrained aura around him. It did not feel like the absence of power. It felt more like some terrifying strength had been deliberately sealed away. I held his hand and smiled. "Those people are blind. I think your tail is the most beautiful in the world. It looks like snow and like the moon above the ninth heaven." Lanch trembled. He looked up at me in disbelief. The moonlight reflected in his clear eyes, slowly melting the layer of ice that had frozen there for years. Then he nodded heavily. "If your highness does not despise me, Lanch will protect you with his life." 3 days later, Shuhua and Liyuan's wedding took place as planned. The entire imperial city was decorated with lanterns and pearls. Golden coral trees were hung with bright night pearls, lighting the deep sea as if it were day. Shuhua wore a wedding gown woven from golden silk spat by ancient divine clams. Her tail was covered with glittering golden scales, and with Liyuan by her side, she moved proudly among the ministers and nobles. I attended the wedding with Lanch. Lanch wore only a simple green robe. I wore a plain dress. We sat in the most remote seats, far from the bustle of the main area. Shua soon came over with a wine cup in hand, her arm linked with Liyuan's. She looked at me, then at Lanch, and gave a contemptuous laugh. "Oh, sister, why are you dressed so poorly today?" Anyone who didn't know better would think the eldest princess residence had fallen so far that you couldn't even afford a proper gown. But I suppose that makes sense. Brother-in-law is a white tail from the barren sea. He probably has never seen a scene like this before. Liyuan swirled the jade cup in his hand, eyes full of disdain. "Shuhua, don't tease them. For a white-tailed merfolk, being allowed to eat these spiritual fruits is already a great blessing. Under ordinary circumstances, they wouldn't even have the right to see me." Lanch's hands tightened inside his sleeves. Blue veins rose on the backs of his hands. He was enduring it, but I could feel the anger inside him. I gently pressed his hand to calm him. Then I stood meeting Shuhua and Liyuan's eyes without fear. "On your wedding day, sister, you should pay more attention to your husband. Whether I live well or badly does not require your concern. Gold may be precious, but it is also harsh on the eyes. Be careful not to stare too long and hurt yourself." Shuhua's face changed. She snorted coldly. "Keep pretending, sister. Once my child is born and inherits Liyuan's golden-tailed bloodline, that will be true nobility. As for you, you're destined to give birth to a nest of white-tailed trash with no spiritual power." Liyuan said proudly, "Eldest princess, I would like to see what glory your useless husband can bring you." I only smiled. I no longer bothered answering them. On the way back to my residence, Lanch was quiet. He followed behind me without saying a word. I stopped and turned to him. "What is it? Are you unhappy?" He lowered his head, his voice heavy with guilt. "I dragged your highness down. If not for me, you wouldn't have been mocked like that." I cupped his face and forced him to look into my eyes. "Lanch, look at me. Since I chose you, I'm not afraid of anyone's mockery. Those people only judge what they see on the surface. I believe that one day you will make all of them shut their mouths." Lanch stared at me. A nearly obsessive determination flashed in his eyes. He lowered his head and kissed my fingertips. "Good," he said. "I'll listen to your highness." The days passed. With the support of the blazing sun sea, Shuhua became more and more arrogant at court. Li Yuan also began participating in Canglan's affairs, faintly taking on the posture of a powerful consort. As for Lanchi and me, we lived quietly. When we were free, we admired flowers in the garden. When we were busy, we read in the study. Lanch was extremely intelligent. Though he did not display spiritual power, he possessed profound insight into military strategy, governance, and the management of a kingdom. Every time we spoke at length, I was amazed by the depth of his knowledge. One day, an imperial decree spread through Canglan city. Father would open the sea god ruins during the centennial sea soul sacrifice. The sea god ruins were the sacred grounds of the Canglan Empire. Inside were countless treasures, opportunities, and inheritances left by generations of sea emperors. After marriage, each royal child had to enter the ruins to seek the sea-stabilizing divine pearl. Whoever found a divine pearl would receive the blessing of the sea god, gain immense spiritual power, and might even become a candidate for the next throne. Shuhua naturally had her eyes fixed on victory. She declared openly at court that Li Yuan would obtain the largest divine pearl. Because of Lanch's white tail status, the two of us were originally not allowed to enter. But after Shuhua repeatedly encouraged Father to let us join, he eventually agreed. Her intention was obvious. She wanted to use Li Yuan's hand to crush us inside the ruins. On the day we set out, Father sent us off before the sea god temple. Shuhua and Li Yuan wore golden battle armor and looked majestic, followed by a large group of guards. Lanch and I wore light, plain clothes and brought only 2 attendants. After we entered the ruins, the seawater around us became violent and wild. Broken ancient palaces rose around us. In the shadows, powerful sea beasts watched. Relying on their numbers and strength, Shuhua and Li Yuan charged ahead. Lanch and I walked behind without hurry. He stayed close at my side. Though no spiritual glow came from him, every step he took seemed to make the raging currents around us part on their own. Suddenly, an earth-shaking roar sounded ahead. The sea surged. Sand and stone flew everywhere, blocking our view. Shuhua and Li Yuan's group had encountered a deep-sea berserk shark guarding the ruins. It was a 10,000-year-old beast, its body covered with black spikes, its blood-red eyes glowing with savage light. Li Yuan shouted and released brilliant golden power. He transformed into a giant golden merman and fought the shark head-on. His tail swept through the water, sending golden blades slashing toward the beast. But the shark's hide was too thick. The golden blades left only faint white marks, and instead enraged it further. Shuhua went pale with fear. She ordered the guards forward, but the shark swallowed several of them in a single bite. Li Yuan gradually lost ground. At last, the shark struck him with its tail and sent him crashing into a coral reef, where he spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing Lanch and me watching from nearby, Shuhua screamed, "Kang Yu, you wretch! Hurry up and make your useless husband help. If anything happens to Li Yuan, the blazing sun sea will never spare you." I laughed coldly. Sister, what a good memory you have. Just a moment ago, didn't you say my husband was a useless creature with no spiritual power? Why are you begging a useless creature now that you're in danger? Shuhawa trembled with rage, but she could do nothing. At that moment, after wounding Liyuan, the deep-sea berserk shark seemed to sense something. Its blood-red eyes suddenly turned toward Lanch and me. Then it roared, abandoned Liyuan, and charged at us like a beast gone mad. Lanch's face turned ice-cold. He pulled me behind him and narrowed his eyes at the oncoming shark. Liyuan lay on the ground, coughing blood, yet still sneered at us. Go on, Dai. Even my golden tail power couldn't stop that thing. You two pieces of trash are waiting to be torn apart. But then something shocking happened. When the berserk shark came within 3 zhang of Lanchi, Lanch lifted one hand and gently touched the void with his fingertip. With a thunderous boom, an indescribable pressure erupted from him. His silver hair whipped wildly through the seawater. His gentle eyes turned completely black. There was no white, only endless darkness, like Guishu before the arrival of a storm. On his white tail, ancient black runes appeared, dark as ink. Those runes released an aura that made the soul tremble. The once arrogant shark froze the instant it felt that pressure. The madness in its blood-red eyes vanished, replaced by absolute fear. It let out a shrill whimper and actually knelt in the water. Its enormous body trembled like a guilty servant begging forgiveness from its king. Shuhua and Liyuan were completely stunned. Their mouths hung open, but they could not make a sound. Lanch ignored them. He lowered his hand. The blackness in his eyes faded, and the runes on his tail sank back beneath his skin. He turned to me nervously, afraid I might have been frightened by what I had seen. "Your Highness," he said softly, "are you hurt?" I stepped forward and held his hand. It was cold, but I held it tightly. "I'm fine, Lanch. You did well." The berserk shark, as if unable to bear the pressure any longer, fled at the fastest speed of its life. In the place where it had knelt, it left behind a huge pearl glowing with warm blue light. It was the rarest treasure of the ruins, the supreme sea god pearl. Lanch picked up the pearl and placed it in my hands. The pearl was the size of an infant's fist and held endless pure water spiritual power. My heart filled with joy. In the distance, Shuhua stared at it with jealousy so intense that her eyes seemed ready to bleed. But after seeing Lanch's terrifying power, she did not dare say a single word. She could only leave in disgrace, supporting the pale and terrified Liyuan. When the trip to the ruins ended, and Lanch and I presented the supreme sea god pearl to Father, he was so shocked that he rose directly from his throne. His hands trembled as he touched the pearl. This is truly the supreme divine pearl. How did you obtain it? Did the guardian beast not stop you? Shuhua and Liyuan stood below with unnatural expressions. Shuhua opened her mouth, clearly wanting to lie, but Liyuan tugged at her sleeve, warning her not to act rashly. Even now, they were still afraid of the power Lanche had shown in the ruins. They did not know whether he had used some evil technique or hidden some terrifying strength. In the end, Shuhua could only grit her teeth and say, "Father, elder sister, and brother-in-law were merely lucky. They happened upon the beasts fighting each other and picked up a bargain." Father looked meaningfully at me, then at Lanch, who stood beside me looking as gentle and obedient as ever. Though he had many doubts, the evidence was before him. Lanch and I had indeed brought back the divine pearl, so Father publicly announced that the 10,000-year inheritance of the sea god ruins would be granted to the eldest princess residence. He also rewarded us with countless heavenly materials and earthly treasures. Nourished by the supreme sea god pearl, my body changed in subtle ways. Not long afterward, the imperial physician diagnosed that I was pregnant. The news stirred another storm across Canglan City. At almost the same time, good news also came from Shuhua's residence. She was pregnant too. Now both princesses were expecting children, and the entire Canglan Empire focused its attention on our bellies. Everyone knew merfolk bloodlines were precious. The strength of a bloodline could often be detected even before birth through the mother's spiritual fluctuation. Shuhua's husband was the golden-tailed Liyuan, so from the beginning, her belly radiated a faint golden light. The spiritual fluctuation was extremely strong. Every day, rare spiritual medicines were sent into her residence, and Shuhua proudly walked through the palace with her belly held high, boasting to everyone about the golden-tailed heir she carried. In comparison, my belly was so quiet that some people began to worry. Aside from a gentle warmth brought by the sea god Pearl in the beginning, there was almost no spiritual fluctuation at all. It was as calm as an ordinary human pregnancy. People whispered that Princess Kangyu was indeed unable to give birth to an extraordinary child. A white tail was still a white tail. Even if we had luckily obtained the divine pearl, we could not change our humble fate. The child born would surely be a useless white-tailed merfolk. Faced with such rumors, Launch became tense and guilty. Every day, he found ways to make me good food. He personally went to dangerous deep-sea places to search for herbs to stabilize the pregnancy. He even used his own essence blood to nourish my body. One night, I lay on the bed and looked at his pale, worn face. My heart ached. I pulled his hand over and placed it on my lower belly. It was still calm, but I could feel a small life growing healthily inside me. His aura was only hidden very deeply, so deeply that even I could sense it only now and then. "Fool," I said softly. "Don't listen to what people say. No matter what color he is, as long as he is our child, I will love him." Lanch leaned gently against my side, listening to the sound beneath my belly. His voice was hoarse. "Your Highness, I'm sorry. It's because my bloodline is low that the child will have to bear such insults from birth. If I could, I would rather trade my life for a noble bloodline for him." I covered his mouth. "What nonsense are you saying? Your life belongs to me. You are not allowed to think like that. Besides, my instincts tell me our child will disappoint no one." Time passed. After 10 months of pregnancy, the day of birth arrived. That day, both princesses of Canglan went into labor at the same time. The atmosphere in the imperial palace was tense to the extreme. Father personally waited in the side hall. Shuhua's delivery room and mine were separated only by a corridor. Imperial physicians and divine shamans filled the area. From Shuhua's side, 10,000 beams of golden light rose early. They even drew a rare golden auspicious sign in the deep sea. The sky turned gold, waves glittered across the surface. Rare golden seabirds circled overhead and cried out. From her chamber came Shuhua's sharp, powerful cries. My side, however, was terrifyingly quiet. The room was even a little cold. Lanchi stood outside the door, pacing anxiously. His fingers had dug deep into his palms. Blood flowed between them, yet he did not notice. Then a clear infant's cry rang out from Shuhua's delivery room. At that instant, the golden sign in the sky reached its peak. The imperial physician shouted excitedly, "Congratulations, Your Majesty. Congratulations, second princess. It is a young prince. His tail is pure gold, his bloodline is noble, his spiritual power heavenly. He will surely become great in the future." Father was overjoyed and called out praise after praise. He even went personally to Shuhua's chamber and admired the golden-tailed infant, who glowed like a small sun. Liyuan stood proudly at the side, lifting his chin as he looked with disdain toward the quieter direction of the eldest princess residence. Everyone believed the outcome had been decided. Shuhua's child would be the future crown prince of Canglan, But then the clear sky suddenly darkened. A violent wind rose. Rain poured down. Beneath the deep sea, the water trembled violently, as if some terrifying existence were awakening. Then came a massive rumbling sound, ancient and vast, as though it came from the beginning of the world. It was not thunder. It was the opening of the gate of Guishu. On the once calm sea surface, an enormous black vortex appeared. At its center was an aura that seemed capable of destroying all things. Countless sea beasts prostrated themselves on the seabed, trembling so hard they did not even dare lift their heads. Father's face changed. What is this? Is a treasure descending, or is this heavenly punishment? Before anyone could react, the terrible black clouds gathered in the sky and formed the vast shadow of a black-tailed merman. The shadow circled once above Canglan City, roared, then turned into a stream of ink-black light and shot through the layers of seawater into my delivery room. In that instant, a suffocating pressure erupted from my chamber. It was hundreds, even thousands of times stronger than what lunch had revealed in the ruins. The physicians and maids around me could not withstand it. One after another, they collapsed unconscious. In the silence that followed, a baby boy was born. His entire body gleamed darkly, and his tail was black as ink, flickering with purple-black lightning. He opened his eyes as soon as he was born. Those eyes were like black jade, deep beyond measure. At first, he did not cry. He simply looked at the world with a cold and noble gaze. Only after several breaths did his cry ring through heaven and earth. With that cry, the waters of the entire Canglan Sea boiled, and countless tides rose and fell. Father, Li Yuan, and even Shuhua, who had just given birth, were all stunned. They stared toward my delivery room, where the giant black infant shadow lingered in the air. This is... Father's voice trembled so badly he could not finish the sentence. As Sea Emperor, he naturally knew the ancient prophecy of the merfolk. It was said that when darkness covered Canglan, when the gate of Guishu opened, and when a black-tailed merman descended, the Lord of Guishu would return. He would rule the four seas and stand invincible beneath heaven. The imperial physician carried the black-tailed infant to Father and knelt with a thud. His voice shook. "Your Majesty, the eldest princess has given birth. She has given birth to a black-tailed prince. This is the legendary Guishu Black Tail." Father looked at the child with rapid breathing, his eyes filled with ecstasy and awe. Ignoring his dignity as emperor, he knelt on one knee before the infant and said in a trembling voice, "After 10,000 years, my Canglan clan has finally awaited the birth of the Lord of Guishu." When Shuhua heard the news from her bed, she spat out blood and fainted. Li Yuan's face turned ashen. His body trembled. He looked at his supposedly noble golden-tailed son and realized that, before this black tail that seemed able to devour everything, the golden glow was nothing but a firefly before the moon. Father immediately announced, "The eldest Princess Kangyu has given birth to a black-tailed prodigy. This is heaven's blessing upon Canglan. From this day forth, I appoint this child as the crown prince of the Canglan Empire, heir to the next Sea Emperor's throne. The eldest princess residence shall be honored above all, and no one may offend it." I lay exhausted on the bed, looking at the dark, chubby, yet strangely dignified little thing in Father's arms. My heart was filled with tenderness. I named him Moyao, meaning the brightest star in the black night. At some point, Lanch came to my side. He gently took my hand. His silver hair had turned black overnight, dark as ink. His once clear eyes had become deep beyond measure. He looked at me with endless tenderness. "Your Highness," he whispered, "we did it. Our child is the ruler of the world." I looked at the change in him and smiled. "Lanch, no, perhaps I should call you the Lord of Guishu now." He paused, then smiled indulgently and kissed my forehead. No matter who I am still your highness's Lanch. If your highness needs me, I can overturn this sea for you at any time." Shu Hua and Li Yuan did not give up. Although Mo Yao had been named crown prince, he was still an infant. In secret, Shu Hua joined forces with the Blazing Sun Sea and planned to strike during Mo Yao's 100-day celebration, seize power, and claim the throne. But they underestimated Lanche. At the 100-day banquet, powerful experts from the Blazing Sun Sea surrounded the hall with elite soldiers. Li Yuan tore away all pretense and pointed at me, calling my black-tailed child a demon who should be burned. That was when Lanchi moved. That day, he hid nothing. With one wave of his hand, tens of millions of li of sea outside Canglan City froze in an instant. The Blazing Sun elites did not even have time to scream before they turned into ice sculptures and shattered into powder in the deep sea. Lanch walked toward Li Yuan step by step. With each step, a black guishu flower bloomed beneath his feet. His pressure was so powerful that Li Yuan's golden tail cracked inch by inch, its blood staining the palace. Looking down at him, Lanch said coldly, "Gold tail? In my eyes, it is merely a mixed color. For Shu Hua's sake, I originally intended to spare your life, but you dared to touch my wife and child. Since that is so, the Golden Crow Sea can change masters." Then Lanch moved his fingertip. Li Yuan's body burst into a cloud of blood and disappeared into the water. Shu Hua went mad. She cried and threw herself before Father, begging him to uphold justice. But Father only looked at her coldly and waved his hand. "You brought this upon yourself. Guards, strip Shu Hua of her princess title. Banish her to the endless abyss. She shall never step out again." As for the golden-tailed child, Father ordered him sent to the barren border sea to be raised by loyal generals. Whether he lived long or short would depend on his own fate. After that battle, no one dared show the slightest disrespect toward the eldest princess residence again. Lanch's true identity was also revealed. He had never been some useless prince from the barren sea. He was the reincarnation of the first-generation Guishu sea god, who had fallen in the ancient war between gods and demons and been reborn in Guishu. The reason his tail had been white was that he had sealed all Guishu power within himself. White was ultimate purity. It was the color of all things after they returned to zero. Only when his bloodline merged with the purest royal bloodline of Canglan could a perfect black-tailed merfolk be born. Checkpoint. 3,000 words, 20 min at 150 WPM. After the 100-day rebellion, the structure of the Canglan Empire changed completely. In the imperial city, whether commoners or officials spoke of the eldest princess residence, their voices carried awe and longing. The white-tailed prince, who had once been treated as a disgrace, had become the most untouchable existence in all 4 seas. And my son Mo Yao, barely 100 days old, grew under the attention of everyone like a star surrounded by constellations. Mo Yao rarely cried. His bright black eyes always held a calmness that did not suit his age. Though he was still an infant, under Lanch's guidance, his spiritual power was extremely well contained. The violent Guishu lightning flowed quietly through his meridians, and only when he was angry or happy would 1 or 2 sparks of purple-black thunder appear at his fingertips. Whenever I saw Mo Yao mischievously burn the corner of Lanch's robe with a little flash of lightning, I could not help laughing. Lanch adored this son deeply, but he was also strict. He would wrap his large hand around Mo Yao's little hand and slowly guide pure black sea god energy into him, widening his meridians bit by bit. One day, Lanch leaned against my shoulder and looked at Mo Yao waving his little fists in the cradle. "This little fellow's talent is even better than mine back then," he said gently. "It seems it won't take long before he can stand on his own." I turned to look at his black hair and lifted a strand between my fingers. Back then, why did you seal your power and go to the extreme cold barren sea as a prince who endured everyone's contempt? Lanch's eyes dimmed slightly, as though he had remembered something from long ago. He took my hand and said slowly, "During the war between gods and demons, Guishu was destroyed. I was the lord of Guishu, but I suffered wounds that could not heal. To prevent the remnants of Guishu from finding me, and to give my body time to recover, I used the most extreme form of the stainless whitetail to seal my violent power. I came to Canglan because some unseen force guided me here, telling me I would find the person who could break the seal. Then, at the husband selection ceremony, I saw you. In that moment, I knew the guidance had not been wrong. Your Canglan royal bloodline was the purest water power. It was the key that could unlock my seal." I leaned into his arms and listened to his steady heartbeat. "So, you chose me only to break your seal?" Lanch immediately tightened his arms around me, anxious as he explained, No, Your Highness. Before I saw you, I only wanted to survive. But after seeing you, I only wanted to remain by your side. Whether the seal broke or not no longer mattered. To be your husband was enough for me. Even if I remained a despised, white-tailed merman forever, I would have accepted it willingly." His earnest confession filled my heart with sweetness. I wrapped my arms around his neck and kissed him lightly. "Fool, I was teasing you. How could I not know your heart?" 3 years passed. Moyao could now run through the garden on his chubby little legs, chasing colorful bubbles. He could skillfully switch between human legs and his black tail. With his short black hair and round, fair face, he was so adorable that anyone who saw him wanted to hold him. But in the place of Shuhua's exile, the endless abyss, the situation was not peaceful. The endless abyss lay at the lowest level of the Canglan Sea. Sunlight never reached it. Violent currents and poisonous miasma filled the place year-round. Those imprisoned there were all people guilty of terrible crimes. Shushua's had been spoiled since birth. How could she endure such suffering? In that cold, dark abyss, she hated me day and night. She hated Lanch. She even hated our father. In a ruined stone hut, Shuhua sat with disheveled hair. Her once lovely face had twisted into something fierce and ugly. Looking at her skin, rough and corroded by poison miasma, she screamed and smashed the mirror before her. "Kangyu," she hissed through clenched teeth, "why do you get to remain the high and noble eldest princess? Why does your bastard child get to become crown prince while I suffer here? Liyuan is dead. My child was taken away. This is all your fault. I want you dead. I want all of you dead." As Shuhua vented her madness, a low, grating laugh came from the darkness outside. It sounded like metal scraping against metal. A figure wrapped in a black robe slowly entered. Thick black energy surrounded him. His tail was strange, belonging to none of the known colors. It was a nauseating gray-brown, covered in ugly, poisonous tumors. Shuhua jumped in fright and glared at him. "Who are you? How did you get in? How dare you trespass in my residence? Are you tired of living?" The man laughed hoarsely. "Second princess, you are no longer a noble princess. You are only an abandoned prisoner. However, if you want revenge, I can help you." The word revenge overwhelmed Shuhua's fear. She stepped forward and stared at him. "Help me? On what basis? Kanju and Lanch are terrifyingly powerful. Even the Blazing Sun elites were no match for them. What ability do you have?" The black-robed man took out an ink-black jade bottle. Strange runes covered it, and a suffocating bloody aura rose from within. "This is nether blood poison," he said. "I refined it from the souls of 10,000 living beings. As long as you put it into the food of Kangyu and her son, within 3 days their bloodlines will rot away, and they will turn into puddles of blood. Even if Lanchi were an immortal from heaven, there would be no cure. Shuhua stared at the bottle. For a moment, hesitation flickered in her eyes, but hatred quickly devoured it. With trembling hands, she took the bottle. Fine, I agree. But how will you get me out of this cursed abyss? The black-robed man smiled coldly. The abyss is guarded by Canglan soldiers, but since I was able to enter, naturally I can leave. Tonight at midnight, I will wait for you at the abyss exit. That night, with the black-robed man's help, Shuhua silently escaped the endless abyss. When the news reached Canglan City, Father was furious. He immediately sent a large number of guards to search the entire city and placed the imperial city under strict lockdown. At the eldest princess residence, I looked at the search order in my hand and frowned slightly. Beside me, Lancha was peeling a sweet deep-sea spiritual fruit. After finishing, he brought a piece to my lip. Seeing my concern, he said calmly, "Your Highness, don't worry. Shuhua is already at the end of her strength. She cannot create a large wave. As for the person who took her away, I believe I can guess who it is." I ate the fruit and looked at him. Who? His gaze turned cold. A remnant of the Mulzu Sea. In the ancient war, Gishu's enemies were not only demons, there were also merfolk traders who joined them. They called themselves the Grey Flood Dragon Clan and specialized in vile, poisonous methods. After the war, they hid in the Maluo Deep Sea. This time, by helping Shuhua escape, they probably intend to use her against us, while testing my strength. I gave a cold smile. They really do not know when to stop. Since they want to die, let's grant their wish. A few days later, Canglan City appeared calm on the surface, but I could feel a storm gathering in the air. That day was Father's birthday. A grand banquet was held in the palace, and all civil and military officials attended. Shuhua, disguised as a palace musician, slipped into the imperial kitchen before the banquet began. She used a large sum to bribe a maid responsible for delivering food to the eldest princess residence. Then she poured the entire bottle of nether blood poison into my favorite snow swallow silver ear soup. Watching the odorless poison dissolve into the soup, Shuhua's face twisted into a cruel smile. "Kangyu," she whispered, "tonight is the night you die." The banquet began. Music filled the hall. Father sat high above with a smile, while Moyao, dressed in a delicate red court robe, sat obediently between Launch and me, playing with a jade rattle. Shuhua stood among the musicians, wearing a thin veil. Her venomous eyes were fixed on us. Soon the bribed maid walked in carrying the silver ear soup. Her head was lowered, her expression nervous. The tray in her hands trembled slightly. Lanch was far too sharp. The instant the maid stepped into the hall, he smelled a faint yet evil, bloody scent. It came from the steaming soup. A trace of disdain flashed through his eyes, but he said nothing. He simply sat there and watched the maid approach. The maid placed 2 bowls of soup before Moyao and me. In a hurried voice, she said, "Please enjoy, Your Highness, little crown prince." I was about to lift my bowl when Lanch stopped me. He shook his head slightly, then looked at the maid. "Withdraw," he said. The maid seemed relieved and immediately turned to leave, but then Moyao put down his rattle. He sniffed, then fixed his black eyes on the bowl of soup in front of him. In his soft little voice, he said, "Smells sweet, smells bad, bad smell." The hall, previously full of conversation, fell silent. Father looked over in surprise. "Yaoer, what is it?" "What bad smell?" I looked at the soup, then at the terrified maid, and understood most of it. Lanch gave a cold laugh. He stood, lifted the bowl, and looked at the maid. His voice was colder than frost. "There seems to be something in this soup that should not be here. You drink it." The maid fell to her knees with a thud, trembling like a leaf. She kowtowed again and again. "Mercy, Your Highness! Mercy, Prince! I don't know anything. I truly don't know." It was the second princess. No, it was Shuhua. She forced me to do it. The entire hall burst into uproar. Father slammed his hand on the table and rose in fury. Shuhua! That rebellious daughter is alive, and she dares poison us. At the side of the hall, Shuhua saw that the matter had been exposed. She could no longer restrain herself. She tore off her veil, revealing that twisted face, and laughed shrilly. So what if you discovered it, Kangyu? Tonight, all of you will die here. At her command, black mist surged from all sides of the hall. The mist instantly formed into ugly gray flood dragon merfolk. Their bodies reeked, and they held black halberds as they charged at everyone in the hall. Officials and nobles scattered in panic. The black-robed man appeared from the mist and stood in the center of the hall. His gray eyes fixed on Launch, and he laughed proudly. First, Gishu Sea God, your era has passed. Today the Moluo Sea shall rule Canglan. Launch looked at the gray flood dragon merfolk rushing in. There was no panic on his face, only endless coldness. He turned to me and said gently, Your Highness, sit here with Yaoer for a moment. I'll be back shortly. I smiled and nodded. Go, finish it quickly. Don't ruin Father's birthday banquet. Launch turned and walked toward the center of the hall. His black hair moved without wind. A terrifying aura erupted from within him like a volcano, making every soul in the room tremble. The first few gray flood dragon merfolk had not even touched the corner of his robe before the pressure shattered them into black blood mist. The black-robed man's face changed. Impossible. How did you release all your seals so quickly? Launch did not answer. His figure blurred and vanished. The next instant, he appeared in front of the black-robed man. He lifted one pale, slender hand and seized the man by the throat. The gray flood dragon demonic power in the black-robed man's body melted away in Launchi's grip as if it had met its natural enemy. Looking at him coldly, Launchi said, Remnants of the Moluo Sea, I was wondering where to find your nest. I didn't expect you to deliver yourself to my door. Since that is so, use your life to broaden my child's horizons. Then he tightened his hand. Ink-black Wishu lightning surged through his arm and into the black-robed man's body. The man screamed. In the black lightning, his body disintegrated inch by inch until not even dust remained. When the remaining gray flood dragon merfolk saw their leader killed in an instant, they were terrified and turned to flee. But Launch would not give them that chance. He pressed his right hand downward. Countless black vines appeared on the floor of the hall, writhing like spiritual snakes. They bound every gray flood dragon merfolk in place. Then Guishu lightning surged, burning them all to ash. The hall returned to silence. Only a faint scorched smell remained to prove that a battle had happened. Shuhua collapsed to the floor. Seeing the gray flood dragon experts wiped out in the blink of an eye, she was completely stunned. As Launchi walked toward her step by step, she saw his black hair and bottomless eyes, and felt as though the judge of hell had come for her. She trembled and crawled backward, muttering, No, impossible. How can you be this strong? You were clearly just a white-tailed waste. A waste. Launch looked down at her without sympathy. Then he turned to me. Your Highness, how would you like to deal with this woman? I stood, holding Moyao in my arms, and walked to Shuhua. Looking at her face filled with jealousy and terror, I sighed. Shuhua, you and I were born from the same womb. I wanted to leave you a way to live, to let you reflect in the endless abyss, but you insisted on seeking death. In my arms, Moyao suddenly lifted his little finger and pointed at Shuhua. Bad, he said unclearly. Bad. As soon as he spoke, a point of purple-black lightning shot from his fingertip and struck Shuhua squarely between the brows. With a soft boom, Shuhua froze. The light in her eyes vanished. Then her body turned into an ice sculpture and shattered into countless crystals. disappearing into the deep sea. This woman, who had tried again and again to kill us, ultimately died at the hands of my son, who was not yet 3 years old. It was almost ironic. Father looked at the scattered crystals and sighed deeply. There was sorrow in his eyes, but he knew better than anyone that Shuhua had brought this upon herself. The officials in the hall fell to their knees and shouted in unison, "Long live the eldest princess! Long live the prince consort! Long live the crown prince!" After that battle, Canglan finally settled into peace. The remnants of the Moluo Sea were rooted out under Lanch's personal command. From then on, the 4 seas knew no war. 10 years later, Moyao grew into a tall, handsome youth. He formally succeeded father and became the new Sea Emperor of the Canglan Empire. On the day of his coronation, his ink-black tail, carrying majestic lightning, swept through the water in a beautiful arc. All people submitted before him. His rule would lead Canglan into an unprecedented golden age. That same night, Lanch and I quietly left Canglan City. We took only a small boat made of 10,000-year auger wood and drifted across the blue sea. The setting sun dyed the waters gold and red. Lanch sat beside me. The sea breeze stirred his black hair. His tail had turned into human legs, and his feet moved lightly in the water. He wrapped an arm around my shoulders and looked at the beautiful sunset. "Your Highness," he asked softly, "where shall we go from here?" I turned to look at his flawless face, untouched by time, and smiled. "As long as you're with me, I'll go anywhere." He smiled. It was brighter than any flower in the world. Then he lowered his head and kissed me deeply. "Kangyu," he whispered, "having you in this life is enough." Our little boat drifted farther and farther away on the waves. Our 2 figures, leaning against each other, gradually blended into the golden afterglow, like the most beautiful painting in the world. The legend of Canglan Sea continued, and the story of the black-tailed Sea Emperor and his parents would be passed down forever among generations of merfolk. After leaving the imperial city, Lanch and I traveled through every corner of the 4 seas. We went to the far northern ice fields to watch crystal fish leap beneath the frozen surface. We went to the southern warm currents and played among schools of flying fish in countless colorful coral forests. Every landscape became vivid and unforgettable because he was beside me. One day, our boat drifted to the edge of the extreme cold barren sea. This was where Lanchi had been born and raised. It was the home of the white-tailed prince who had suffered so much. The barren sea was cold. Gray fog covered the surface, blocking the light. Huge floating icebergs collided in the currents from time to time, producing dull, heavy sounds. I stood on the deck, pulling my mermaid silk cloak tighter around me. Looking at the desolate scene, my heart ached for him. "You grew up here?" I asked. "It's truly cold." Lanch wrapped his arm around my waist and used his warmth to drive away the chill. He looked at the gray water with complicated eyes. "Yes, this is the poorest and cruelest place in the 4 seas. Here, the weak are prey to the strong. For a white tail without spiritual power, every day meant hunger and fighting. My mother died during a blizzard when floating ice crushed our shelter. I was too young. I could only watch and do nothing." He spoke calmly, but the cruelty of those memories pierced me. I reached out and touched his face. His black hair was a little messy in the wind. "I'm sorry, Lanch. If only I had met you earlier, you wouldn't have suffered so much." He took my hand and kissed it, eyes full of warmth. "Fool! Meeting you now was not too late. Because I suffered those things, I understand even more clearly how precious your Highness's love is." As we spoke, several old bone ships appeared in the mist ahead. They were made from the bones of giant beasts. On them stood fierce merfolk with crude weapons. Their tails were mostly muddy cyan, gray, or dark blue, and they carried the brutal aura of those who had survived in the barren sea for years. On the largest bone ship stood a tall, one-eyed merman holding a rusty steel fork. When he saw our fine little boat, greed burst from his single eye. "Boss, look!" he shouted. "A beautiful wooden boat, and the people on it are dressed so well. They must be rich folk from Canglan City. We're in luck today. Rob them, and we'll have enough to eat for years." At his shout, the bone ships sped up and surrounded our boat from every side. The one-eyed merman waved his fork arrogantly. "People on the boat, listen! If you're smart, leave behind your valuables and clothes, then roll into the sea. If I'm in a good mood, maybe I'll spare your lives." Lanch looked at these barren sea pirates without any change in expression. In his eyes, they were not even ants, but he did not act immediately. Instead, he stared at the one-eyed merman, as if remembering something. After a moment, Lancha smiled faintly. "One Eye, after 200 years, you're still robbing the weak. It seems losing one eye didn't teach you caution." The one-eyed merman froze. He stared at Lanch carefully. Though Lanch's hair was now black and his bearing noble, that peerlessly handsome face was one the pirate remembered. 200 years ago, there had been a white-tailed merman in the extreme cold barren sea who fought like a mad dog. Though he had no spiritual power, he could fight desperately. Every time the pirates tried to rob him, they gained nothing and were forced to fight for their lives. The one-eyed merman's missing eye had been pierced by that white-tailed boy with a sharp fishbone during a fight over food. His expression turned ugly. He pointed at Lanch in disbelief. You're that white-tailed bastard. Impossible. Weren't you sent to Canglan City as a slave? How are you still alive? And why is your hair black? Where is your tail?" The instant I heard him insult Lanch, my face turned cold. I was about to step forward, but Lanch gently stopped me. "Looking at the pirate," he said calmly, "thank you for your concern. This prince is doing very well. I not only survived, I married the eldest princess of the Canglan Empire." At the words eldest princess, the pirates grew restless and looked at me in disbelief. The one-eyed merman froze, then burst into laughter. His laugh was full of mockery. "Brothers, did you hear that? This white-tailed waste says he married the eldest princess of Canglan City. If he can marry a princess, then I'm the Sea Emperor. Those Canglan nobles look down on everyone. How could they ever take a white tail seriously?" The other pirates roared with laughter, filling the air with filthy words. But their laughter soon stuck in their throats. Lanch slowly raised his right hand and flicked his fingertip through the air. In an instant, a freezing aura so terrifying that no one could breathe swept outward from our boat like a tidal wave. The turbulent barren sea froze in less than the blink of an eye. Vast stretches of water, towering waves, and huge floating icebergs all became crystal-clear ice sculptures. The bone ships and the hundreds of pirates on them froze in their mocking postures, without even a chance to resist. Only the one-eyed merman remained partly unfrozen. Because he stood at the highest point of the largest ship, his lower body was sealed to the deck, but his upper body remained free. The mocking grin had died on his face, replaced by absolute terror. He trembled so violently that his teeth chattered. Lanch brushed non-existent dust from his sleeve and took my hand. Step by step, we left the boat and walked across the ice as easily as strolling through a garden. He stood beneath the bone ship and looked up. His voice was calm, without warmth. 200 years ago, I had no strength. To survive, I endured your bullying. Even the medicine my mother needed before she died was stolen by you and thrown into the sea. Back then, I swore that if I ever returned, there would no longer be a place for you in the extreme cold barren sea. The one-eyed merman finally understood. The person before him was not a white-tailed waste. He had become a terrifying existence like a god or demon. He dropped to his knees on the frozen deck, ignoring the pain of his broken legs. "Mercy, Prince. I was blind. I deserve death. Back then, I was forced by life too. Please, for the sake of us both being Barren Sea merfolk, spare my dog life." I looked at him and felt no pity, only disgust. This was the kind of person who had bullied Lanchi, who had taken away his mother's last hope. Lanch said coldly, "Spare you? When my mother begged you to leave her one herb, did you spare her? The winds of the barren sea are cold. Go experience them yourself." He turned and led me back toward the boat. Behind him, frost climbed rapidly up the pirate's body. Soon it covered him completely. In his despairing scream, he turned into an ice statue. A bitter wind blew over the barren sea, and the ice statue, along with the whole bone ship, shattered into countless fragments and vanished. After dealing with the pirates, Launch moved his finger. The surrounding ice melted instantly, and the seawater flowed again, as if nothing had happened. Back on the boat, Lanch looked at me with guilt in his eyes. "I'm sorry, Your Highness. I made you see something so bloody." I hugged him tightly and pressed my head to his chest. "Fool, why apologize? They hurt you and your mother. This was what they deserved. I only hate that I didn't appear earlier, so I could face those dark days with you." Lanch held me tighter and kissed my hair. "With those words from you, every hardship I suffered was worth it." We stayed in the extreme cold barren sea for several days. Beneath a desolate ice mountain, Launch found the cave where his mother had once lived. There we erected an unnamed stone tablet and carved her name into it with the finest spiritual crystal. Lanch stood before the tablet for a long time without speaking. But I knew the deepest wound in his heart had finally begun to heal because I was there beside him. After leaving the barren sea, our life returned to peace and leisure. Years later, Moyao sent a letter through an envoy. It said that a lovely little granddaughter had been born to us. Her tail was not pure black, but it was a beautiful, noble purple gold. She was adorable and kept asking to see her grandfather and grandmother. Reading the crooked yet spirited characters in the letter, Launch and I smiled at each other. He pinched my nose gently. "It seems we must end this trip and go back to enjoy being grandparents." I leaned into his arms and laughed. "All right, but this time we must make it clear to Yaoer. We are only responsible for holding our granddaughter. We will not discipline those noisy little ones." Lanch laughed, lifted me into his arms, and flew toward the eldest princess residence, toward the warmest home in the deep sea. Checkpoint 6,000 words, 40 min at 150 WPM. When our little boat returned to Canglan waters, a neat formation of merfolk guards came to greet us from afar. Their leader knelt respectfully above the sea. "Greetings, eldest princess." "Greetings, Prince. His Majesty and the Supreme Emperor have been waiting in the Dragon Palace." When the little princess heard of your return, she went early to wait at the southern gate. I nodded with a smile. "Rise. Lead the way." Hand in hand, Launch and I followed the guards into Canglan City. The imperial city was far more prosperous than it had been 100 years earlier. Under Moyao's rule, the cruel class system and slavery had been abolished. Merfolk of every tail color could now live fairly in this sea. White-tailed merfolk could be seen doing business with gold-tailed and blue-tailed merfolk, all of them smiling freely. Looking at that scene, I felt emotional. I turned to Lanch and said softly, "Look, the dream we once had." Yaoer truly made it real. Lanch looked at the white-tailed people moving without fear through the market. His eyes were filled with pride and comfort. "This is your Highness's achievement. If your Highness had not chosen me despite all pressure back then, how could Canglan have become what it is today?" My heart warmed. I lightly pinched him. Still so smooth-tongued. As we spoke, we arrived at the southern gate of the imperial city. Before we could land, a little bundle carved like jade shot out from inside the gate. She wore a pink dress made from the finest flowing mermaid silk. When her tail moved, purple gold light circled around it like a shooting star. She was Moyao's eldest daughter, Monuan. The moment Nuan Nuan saw me, her big eyes lit up like blue gems. "Grandma! Grandma!" Then she hurled herself into my arms like a small cannonball. I caught her soft little body and felt my heart melt. I tapped her nose and laughed. "Oh, my little ancestor, slow down. What if you fall?" Nuan Nuan snuggled in my arms, then lifted her head and looked at Launch curiously. She reached out her chubby hand to tug his black hair. "Grandpa, your hair is so black. Nuan Nuan wants black hair too." Lanch smiled helplessly, eyes full of affection. He took her into his arms. "All right, when you grow up, Grandpa will teach you how to make your hair black." Nuan Nuan clapped happily and said yes again and again. At that moment, Moyao and Father Gyuan, now the Supreme Emperor, came out together. Father looked older, but his spirit was strong. The moment he saw us, he laughed loudly. "Kangyu, Launch, you finally decided to come back. This little girl has been making so much noise in the palace that my head aches every day." Moyao bowed respectfully to us. This son greets father and mother. After Moyao ascended the throne, he had granted Lanchi the title of Supreme Emperor, sharing the highest honor of Canglan with me. I looked at my son, now mature and steady, carrying the majesty of a sea emperor. My heart filled with comfort. I took his hand and looked him over. "Yaoer, you've worked hard. You've governed Canglan very well." Moyao smiled modestly. "It is because Mother taught me well, and Father's strategies for governing have helped me endlessly." That night, the imperial palace held a warm family banquet. There were no stiff ceremonies, no officials coming to offer empty praise. Only our family sat together, eating the special spiritual fruits and delicacies of the deep sea. Nuan Nuan hopped around in the middle, making everyone laugh. During the meal, Father looked at Launch and me with emotion. He lifted his wine cup and said apologetically, "Kanju, back then at the ceremony, I made things difficult for Launch. I nearly ruined your marriage. Looking back now, I truly was old and foolish. Today, I will punish myself with 3 cups and apologize to Lanch." Lanch quickly stood and raised his cup respectfully. "Father-in-law, you speak too seriously. Back then, as Sea Emperor, you naturally had to consider your Highness's future. Lanch never resented you. On the contrary, I must thank you for fulfilling our marriage." Father was even happier after hearing that. He drank 3 cups in a row, his face glowing. After the banquet, Lanch and I took Nuan Nuan for a walk by the pond in the back garden. Moonlight fell across the water. Colorful koi played below the surface. Nuan Nuan had been playing all day and was now asleep on Launch's shoulder, her little mouth moving slightly in the cutest way. Looking at that scene, I felt a peace and happiness I could barely describe. I held Lanch's arm and said softly, "Sometimes I feel like all of this is a dream." From the first glance at the ceremony to grandchildren now, we've gone through so much, yet it feels like the blink of an eye. Lanch stopped. His eyes were as deep as the endless sea. Holding Nuan Nuan in one arm, he pulled me close with the other. In a low, firm voice, he said by my ear, "Kanju, this is not a dream. This is our reality. For every 10,000 years to come, I will stay by your side. Whether poor or rich, sick or healthy, my heart will always belong only to you." Under the moonlight, our shadows embraced on the water, stretching long across the shimmering pond like the most beautiful painting in the world. After returning to Canglan City, Launch and I stayed in the eldest princess residence for a long time. Each day, we played with our granddaughter, played chess with Father, and discussed interesting stories of the 4 seas with Moyao. Life was peaceful and full, but Blanche and I had never been the kind of people who could settle in one place for too long. One morning, as the rising sun painted the imperial city in soft gold, we packed a simple bundle, left 2 letters behind, one for Moyalao, the other for Father and Nuan Nuan, and quietly set out again hand in hand. In the letters we wrote, "The 4 seas are vast, and our journey has not ended. Do not worry." When we stepped out of the city's barrier, the salty sea breeze met us. Looking at the endless blue, Lancia and I smiled at each other. He took my hand and placed it over his heart. "Your Highness, where shall we go this time?" I lifted my face toward the sunlight, glittering across the sea, and smiled. I heard that at the end of the endless sea, there is a sky city floating among the clouds. There are flying fish and flowers that glow with rainbow light. "Launch, will you go with me to see it?" He pulled me into his arms, black hair flying wildly in the wind. His eyes were full of tenderness. "As long as it is somewhere you wish to go, whether heaven or earth, life or death, I will follow." Then he became a stream of ink-black light and wrapped me inside it. With a crisp thunderclap above the sea, that light shot across the horizon like a brilliant falling star and vanished where the water met the sky. The legend of the deep sea continued. The story of the black-tailed sea emperor's parents, of the white-tailed prince, and the eldest princess of Canglan had become an eternal epic in that ancient ocean. Years flowed like water. 10,000 years could pass in the blink of an eye. Yet with him beside me, the long road never felt lonely. Songs rose from the shore of the deep sea. The merfolk sang of our legend. Their voices traveled over the waves and entered the ears of every dreamer, lingering without end. Through the years, we saw prosperity and hardship. We faced tests of life and death and endured the prejudice of the world. But when everything external was stripped away, what remained was the first tremor of the heart. When our eyes met at the husband selection ceremony, in that moment I saw his restraint and unwillingness to surrender. He saw my firmness and trust. That choice changed both our fates. It also changed the future of the Canglan Sea. As our boat moved away from the imperial city again, Lanchi held my shoulder and said softly, "Actually, I've always wanted to thank you. Thank you for not giving up on me back then. Thank you for entrusting your future to a white tail despised by everyone." I looked at him. Tears gathered in my eyes, then turned into clear pearls that slid down my cheeks and fell to the deck with soft chimes. I tightened my grip on his hand. "No, Launch, I should be the one thanking you. Thank you for healing all my loneliness with your gentleness. Thank you for making me the happiest woman in the 4 seas." At last the sun fully set. Night fell. Stars filled the sky and reflected on the sea until it was impossible to tell where heaven ended and water began. Our little boat traveled slowly through that starry sea, as though crossing the border of time and space, moving toward an unknown but hopeful tomorrow. In the years that followed, Lanchi and I left countless footprints across the 4 seas. We descended into the deepest abyss to speak with ancient beasts that had slept for 10,000 years. We flew above the highest clouds and traveled with the wind. We rescued young merfolk in danger and punished sea monsters that committed evil. Every battle fought side by side and every night spent in each other's arms brought our souls closer. Moyao often sent messages through jade slips. He had become a very qualified and sometimes overly strict father. In his letters, he complained that Nuan Nuan had sneaked out to play again, or that she had burned some elder's beard with her purple gold sparks. Though the words were full of helplessness, the warmth of family shone clearly through them. Many years later, Father Gaiyan peacefully passed away when his time came. He died holding Moyao's hand, eyes full of satisfaction. He had lived his life for Canglan. In his final moments, he saw Canglan prosperous, peaceful, and full of descendants. He had no regrets. When Lanch and I heard the news, we quietly returned to the imperial city and paid respects at his tomb, sending him on his final journey. A person's life is like grass and trees passing through autumn. Even merfolk with long lifespans have an end. But if one lives brilliantly and without shame, then life has not been wasted. After the memorial, Lanch and I sat for a long time in the pavilion behind the eldest princess residence. Night was cool as water. Lanch draped a cloak over my shoulders. In his eyes, I saw a worry he tried to hide. "Kangju," he said, "if one day I leave like father did, what will you do?" I turned to look into his black eyes and held his warm, powerful hand. "Fool, you are the Lord of Guishu and possess endless life. How could you leave? But if such a day truly comes, I will go with you. On the road to the underworld beside the river of forgetfulness, I will still hold your hand so you cannot run away." Lanch trembled. Mist rose in his dark eyes. He pulled me fiercely into his arms and held me so tightly. It was as if he wanted to merge me into his body. "Good," he said. "Then it's settled. Life after life, death after death, we will remain together. Never separate." I leaned against his shoulder and closed my eyes with a sweet smile. The water of the deep sea moved gently around us. The glow of the night pearls stretched our shadows long. The bravest and most correct decision I ever made was walking toward that white-tailed boy in the corner at the husband selection ceremony, because that one walk became 10,000 years of devotion, because that one choice became eternal happiness. In Canglan's historical records, there were not many lines about us. They said only that Princess Kangju chose the useless white-tailed Lanch as her husband, gave birth to the black-tailed prodigy Moyao, and later withdrew from the world. But to us, such fame no longer mattered. What mattered was that every morning when we opened our eyes, the first face we saw was still each other's. That was the most beautiful cultivation in the world. When Nuan Nuan reached 200 years old, she finally married. Her husband was a gentle silver-tailed merman from the Eastern Sea. On the day of her wedding, Lanch and I returned to Canglan City once more. Seeing the little girl we had once held in our arms now dressed in red, radiant, and beautiful, I could not stop my tears. Moyao stood nearby. He was now a dignified, middle-aged sea emperor, but watching his daughter marry, his eyes were filled with reluctance and tenderness. He came to our side and said quietly, "Father, Mother, when you left back then, I didn't understand why you would give up the wealth and glory of the imperial city. Now, looking at Nuan Nuan, I think I understand a little." Lanch patted his shoulder. "Yaoer, everyone has something they want to guard and pursue. You are Canglan's emperor and you have your responsibility. But when you are tired, you can pass the throne to the younger generation and come find us." Moyao smiled and nodded heavily. "Good. When that brat grows up enough to take over, I'll definitely come find father and mother." After the wedding, we did not stay long in Canglan City. We set out once more. This time, we did not take a boat. We held hands and swam side by side through the blue sea. Below us were schools of colorful fish. Above us, sunlight pierced through layers of water and scattered golden beams. Lanch turned to look at me. His black hair floated like silk in the sea, and his eyes were full of tenderness. He suddenly shouted, "Kangyu, I love you!" His voice, wrapped in spiritual power, spread across the sea and startled waves of flying fish. Seeing him act like a child, I could not help laughing. I shouted back, "Lanch, I love you too!" Our voices intertwined in the water and echoed for a long time. If life could begin again, I would still walk without hesitation toward that bronze pillar, toward the white-tailed boy everyone despised, because he was the only salvation in my life. He was the most beautiful ornament in my 10,000 years of time. In every corner of the endless sea, the story of the eldest princess and the white-tailed prince was passed down from generation to generation. It taught young merfolk that love had never been about rank or bloodline. It was only about two hearts tightly connected. And that song would continue to travel with the gentle sea breeze, reaching every place where dreams existed. After Nuan Nuan's marriage, the Four Seas entered an unprecedented age of peace. During one exploration, Launch discovered a mysterious passage deep within the extreme cold barren sea. It led to another plane. The passage released a gentle, ancient aura. It was not violent. It seemed to be a crack left from the ancient war, leading to an immortal realm or some distant world. We stood before the passage glowing with soft white light, hand in hand. Lanch looked at me. His eyes carried the desire to explore, but he cared more about my will. "Your Highness," he asked softly, "we have traveled all of Canglan Sea. Are you willing to go with me to the other side of this passage and see a broader world?" I tightened my grip on his hand and smiled without hesitation. "Haven't I already said it? As long as you are with me, even to the ends of heaven and earth, I will go." Lanch looked deeply at me. His black hair moved without wind, and his eyes seemed to contain the entire starry sky. He nodded heavily and led me step by step into the white passage. The moment we entered, the scene around us changed violently. Countless stars flew past us. A new and purer energy flowed into our bodies. I leaned against Lanch's shoulder and closed my eyes, feeling completely at peace. Our life was long enough to be measured in epochs. Yet beside him, even endless years were only one beautiful journey after another. When the light faded, a new world opened before us. It was not barren as we had imagined. It was an ancient, immortal realm filled with spiritual energy and peace. Immortal mountains rose and fell among white clouds. Rare beasts ran through the forests. Powerful cultivators flew through the void. Because our spiritual power had already reached the legendary divine profound realm, the laws of this world did not reject us. We blended into it perfectly. Lanch held my hand and landed atop a mountain glowing faintly purple. We sat on a warm jade stone and looked down at the breathtaking scenery below. Lanch touched my slightly flushed cheek. "Your Highness, are you comfortable with the air here?" I leaned against his chest and listened to his steady heartbeat. "As long as I am with you, anywhere is good." "Launch, I've decided. Let's build a small wooden house here and stop involving ourselves in worldly affairs. Let's live only for the two of us." Lanch smiled. His smile was brighter than the sunlight over the immortal mountain. He kissed my forehead. "As your Highness wishes." In the years that followed, we built an elegant bamboo house on the mountaintop. Around it, we planted immortal flowers and spiritual herbs that released sweet fragrance. Every morning, we watched the sunrise together and cultivated in the first light of dawn. Every evening, we walked beneath the bamboo trees and listened to the wind pass through the leaves. Moyao and Nuan Nuan occasionally sent messages through secret techniques, telling us about Canglan's situation. Moyao said his cultivation was nearing a breakthrough, and that once he could pass the throne to his son, he would bring his wife to this new world to find us. Nuan Nuan said she had given birth to a lovely son with silver hair that looked beautiful underwater, and that he grabbed Moyao's black tail every day, making Moyao furious. Listening to those messages full of daily warmth, Lanch and I would smile together, our hearts full. Time passed in the new world as well. No matter how many years went by, our feelings for each other never faded. Instead, after being washed by time, that original love became richer, deeper, and impossible to part from. One evening, the setting sun dyed the mountain gold and red. The clouds spread across the sky like a splendid silk robe. Lanch and I sat hand in hand on the swing in front of the bamboo house, watching the beautiful dusk. He turned to me, his eyes deep as night. "Kangyu, have you ever regretted your decision back then?" I was stunned, then gave him a reproachful look. "You fool. It has been tens of thousands of years, and you still ask this? If I regretted even a little, would I have walked with you until today?" Lanch laughed and pulled me into his arms. His voice was hoarse with tenderness. "I only wanted to hear you say it yourself. Your Highness, meeting you was the luckiest thing in this life, and in all the tens of thousands of years I have lived." I closed my eyes and pressed my face to his chest. "Me too, Lanch." In the rosy sunset, our figures leaned close together, as if merging with heaven, earth, and time itself. The wind passed through the bamboo forest with a soft rustle, like the world singing for us. During the long cultivation that followed, Lanch and I not only lived like immortal lovers, but also studied the highest laws of that world. Because our hearts had long reached completion, our cultivation advanced rapidly. It was not long before we surpassed the limits of the divine profound realm and entered the legendary realm of primordial supremes, where one could create worlds and live without end. Yet that advancement did not change much for us. We still preferred life in the little bamboo house. Sometimes Lanchig would go to the stream behind the mountain, catch a few spiritual fish, and personally cook my favorite braised fish. Under my countless picky criticisms, his cooking had become unmatched. As for me, I liked lying on a bamboo chair in the afternoon, reading ancient books. When I grew tired, I would rest my head on Lanch's lap and nap. Sunlight passed through the bamboo leaves and scattered warmly across us. One spring, spiritual flowers bloomed across the mountain, turning it into a colorful sea. The breeze carried their fragrance. That day, Moyao's voice transmission talisman suddenly lit up. When Lanch activated it, Moyao's tired yet excited voice came through. "Father, Mother, I broke through. I've already passed the Sea Emperor's throne to my eldest son. Now I'm bringing my wife, Nuan, and the family to ascend to the new world. You have to come receive us." Lanch and I were overjoyed. We hurried to the edge of the mountain. Soon, layers of auspicious clouds surged in the sky. Several powerful beams of light pierced through the barrier of the new world and flew toward our mountain. The leading black lightning was Moyao. Beside him was a gentle blue light, his wife. Behind them were Nuan, her husband, and a silver-haired little boy who shouted excitedly as he flew. Seeing the lively family land on the mountaintop, my eyes grew moist. Nuan ran straight into my arms. "Grandma, I missed you so much." The silver-haired child toddled over too, hugging my leg and calling in his soft voice, "Great Grandma!" Lanch walked toward Moyao with a smile. The two tall, noble men embraced firmly. Moyao grinned somewhat foolishly. "Father, I didn't embarrass you, did I?" "I broke through too." Lanch patted his back, pride shining on his face. "Well done, Yaoer. Worthy of being my son. Worthy of being Guishu's heir." That night, among the blooming flowers, we set up a huge dining table. The whole family sat together. Nuan shared stories about the new world with her mother. Moyao drank with his son-in-law. The silver-haired child chased spiritual rabbits through the flowers. The mountaintop was filled with laughter and warmth. Looking at that scene, I turned to Lanchi. He happened to be looking at me, too. His eyes held endless tenderness and happiness. Beneath the table, he quietly took my hand and interlocked his fingers with mine. Leaning close to my ear, he whispered, "Kangju, thank you." I rested against his shoulder, feeling that familiar, reassuring warmth. Closing my eyes, I smiled and whispered back, "I thank you too, Lanch." In that moment, I finally understood. All suffering, all prejudice, All schemes and darkness were only passing clouds before the purest love. Because of him, the long years became the most beautiful scenery. Because of him, my lonely soul found its warmest home, Chakra Point, 9,000 words, 60 min at 150 WPM. In the long years that followed, our family lived freely on the immortal mountain. Moyao could not stay idle. Though he had stepped down from the throne, he began traveling through the new world and making friends everywhere. Soon he became famous as a carefree supreme being. Nuan Nuan and her husband built a little wooden house on the other side of the mountain. Their silver-haired son improved rapidly under our guidance and followed Launch around every day, begging to learn his divine ice sealing technique. As for Launch and me, our life remained as before, peaceful, warm, and filled with love. Whenever we were free, we liked walking hand in hand through the flower fields or sitting on the swing before the bamboo house, watching the sunset and talking about the past. Once, after hearing the story of the husband selection ceremony, Nuan Nuan asked curiously, "Grandma, were you really so sure Grandpa wasn't useless? What if he had truly been an ordinary white tail with no spiritual power? Wouldn't second grandaunt have laughed at you forever?" I looked at Launch, who sat nearby peeling a spiritual orange for me. His eyes were deep and bright, his lips carrying a gentle smile. I smiled too and took Nuan Nuan's hand. Nuan Nuan, loving someone has never been about how strong he is or how much glory he can bring you. In that moment back then, when I saw him for the first time, my heart told me it was him. Whether he was a noble gold tail or a despised white tail, in my eyes, he was simply Lanchesy, the one I recognized at first glance and wanted to accompany for life. Lanch's hand paused. He lifted his head and his loving gaze fell on me. For a moment, heaven and earth seemed to contain only the two of us. He set down the orange and gently held my hand. He kissed my palm, his voice trembling with endless love. "Kangyu, with those words, my tens of thousands of years of cultivation were worth it." Nuan Nuan covered her mouth and giggled, then skipped away, leaving the space to us. The wind stirred the flowers, sending petals through the air. They landed in our hair and on our shoulders, decorating the moment like a painting. Because of love, we created miracles. Because of love, we walked toward eternity. Sometimes, during those peaceful immortal days, Launch and I would secretly visit other distant lower worlds. We once went to an ancient empire ruled entirely by ordinary humans. There, we lived as a normal married couple. In a bustling mortal town, I opened a small embroidery shop, while Lanchi set up a scholar's stall on the street corner to write letters for others. It was a strange and wonderful experience. There was no surge of spiritual power, no hierarchy of bloodline. Every morning, Launch drove an ox cart to take me to the market outside the city to buy the best silk threads. Every night, I embroidered beneath an oil lamp, while he warmed a pot of simple wine and read old-fashioned poems beside me. Our neighbors envied our affection and said we were a match made in heaven. In those moments, leaning in Lanch's arms while rain fell softly outside the window, I felt that even the dust of the mortal world could be intoxicating. Lanch held me tighter. He wore a washed-out scholar's robe, but on him it looked refined and otherworldly. "Kangju," he said softly, "if one day we grow tired of the immortal mountain, let's find a mortal town like this and live quietly for one lifetime. No cultivation, no pursuit of immortality, only living and dying together as mortals, buried in the same grave." I lifted my head to look at his black eyes, which remained bright as stars even in the mortal world. My heart softened. "All right, I'll listen to you. When that time comes, I won't be a princess anymore. I'll only be your little wife." Lanch laughed and kissed me gently. "In life after life, you are my little wife. We lived out an ordinary mortal lifetime in that world. When we grew old and closed our eyes on the same day, we awakened once more on the immortal mountain as primordial supremes. Tears shone in both our eyes. They were not tears of sorrow. They were the deepest understanding of life and love. After returning to the mountain, we found that Moyao and Nuan Nuan's families had also entered seclusion, each working toward higher realms. Lanchi and I, after experiencing mortal life, had reached a state of mind close to the origin of the Tao. Another 10,000 years passed. Our strength gradually became among the highest in the universe. But to us, nothing in all existence felt more real than the warmth of each other's hands. Spring came and autumn went. Flowers bloomed and withered. Before the bamboo house on the immortal mountain, the swing moved gently in the wind. Lanch and I sat there, fingers intertwined, watching the endless starry sea drift by, his black hair tangled with mine until they could no longer be separated. Looking at the bright stars, he asked softly, "Kangyu, do you want to go see the far side of that galaxy?" I smiled and looked at him, my eyes full of love and certainty. "As long as you take me there, even if it is the end of the universe, I will not turn back." Lanch smiled brighter than any star. Holding me, he became a black and white stream of light and vanished into the vast sea of stars. After crossing countless galaxies, we settled for a time in a world glowing with gentle green light, a place called the Source of Life. There were no immortals, no mortals, only countless ancient divine trees, enormous beyond imagining, each nurturing its own will of life. We sat on the branch of a world tree thousands of zhang tall and looked down at the lush green realm below. Countless little lives fluttered among the leaves, full of vitality. Lanch took out a colorful spiritual seed he had nurtured for 10,000 years. It was the 3 lives flower seed Nuan Nuan had once given us. He planted the seed in the world tree's branch and brushed it gently with our supreme power. In an instant, a strange flower glowing red, blue, and black bloomed quietly from the bark. It released a fragrance that calmed the soul. Lanch looked at it with deep emotion. This 3 lives flower represents the past life, the present life, and the next life. Kangyu, I have carved an oath into it with my soul. No matter what reincarnation, no matter what time and space, I will find you and marry you. Life after life, forever together. I looked at the flower swaying in the wind, my eyes damp. Leaning into his arms, I said, "Me too, Lanch. My soul has long been carved with your name. No matter how the future changes, no matter what form we take, the first moment I see you, my heart will beat for you." Wind moved through the forest of the Source of Life, carrying rings of green light. The 3 lives flower shone brilliantly in the breeze, as if witnessing a love that surpassed time and death. After 1,000 years in the Source of Life, the supreme power in our bodies began to ascend further. We faintly touched the core secret of the entire universe. We no longer needed to fly between worlds. With a single thought, we could project our will into any corner of existence. Yet, unexpectedly, when our power reached such a level, the place we longed for most was still the original Canglan Sea, where the air had tasted of salt and waves. One day, without informing anyone, we returned to the outskirts of Canglan City with a single thought. More than 100,000 years had passed in Canglan. Most of the old people were gone. But to our comfort, Canglan City still stood in the deep sea, and it was even more prosperous than before. At the city gate stood a towering merfolk statue. It had been carved by Moyao himself before he left. The statue showed the eldest princess noble and beautiful, while the white-tailed Lanch stood beside her with gentle eyes. The two leaned against each other, as if silently guarding the people of the sea. Lanch and I transformed into ordinary merfolk, changing our tails to the most common blue and quietly entered the city. Inside a tea house, an elderly merfolk storyteller slapped his wooden block and told the ancient tale with great passion. Back then, Princess Kangyu did not choose a golden tail at the great ceremony. She chose a white tail. What courage that was! Everyone thought she had chosen a waste. Who could have imagined that the white-tailed Prince Launch was the reincarnation of the first Guishu sea god? Once his seal was broken, his power could shake heaven and earth. Later, the black-tailed Prince Moyao was born and led our Canglan Sea into 100,000 years of prosperity. This is fate. This is destiny. The audience cheered loudly. I sat to the side, holding a bowl of ordinary spiritual tea, and could not help finding it amusing. I turned to Lanchi, who was carefully picking floating leaves from my tea bowl, and lowered my voice. "Lanch, listen. Our story sounds like a myth now." He pushed the tea bowl toward me, his gaze as gentle and clear as ever. "Isn't it a myth? The wonderful part is that the heroes of this myth are still alive, and one of them is drinking tea with his little wife right now." My heart warmed, and I could not stop my face from turning slightly red. After tea, we walked together to the old site of the eldest princess residence. It had become a sacred place protected by the imperial family. The 10,000-year coral tree we had planted together had grown tall enough to cover the sky, its red branches glowing softly. We sat beneath that coral tree for a long time, feeling the familiar and intimate aura of that land. Wind moved gently through the sea, forming blue ripples around us. Through all those years, we had witnessed history and created miracles. But what made us most proud was not our power. It was the love that had never wavered, even after more than 100,000 years. Lanch wrapped his arm around my shoulders. His black hair drifted freely in the water, and in his eyes there was only my reflection. "Kangja," he asked softly, "where do you want to go next?" I leaned on his shoulder, held his hand, and closed my eyes with a smile. "As long as you are with me, anywhere is home." In the many ages that followed, we continued drifting between different star realms. We witnessed the dazzling birth of stars and the magnificent destruction of black holes, but wherever we went, Launch remained the same man who would put a cloak over my shoulders in the cold wind and warm a bowl of silver ear soup for me late at night, and I remained the Canglan eldest princess who had walked toward him without hesitation in that great hall, wanting only to take his hand for a lifetime. Our life had long surpassed the meaning of ordinary existence. It had become one of the warmest, brightest lights in the vast universe. Whenever young cultivators asked us for the secret of immortality, Launch would point to me and smile. Immortality is only so one has more time to love someone. At those moments, his eyes were full of stars, and my heart was full of happiness. After countless epochs passed, the universe finally entered another great cycle. All things returned to chaos, but we felt no fear, because as long as our hands remained tightly clasped, as long as our souls still recognized each other, then in the new chaos, in the next world, that touch of pure white and that ink-black tail would meet again. They would once more walk toward each other, under countless watching eyes. They would once more walk toward the eternal future that belonged only to them. When the mist of chaos dispersed and the lands of a new world formed beneath the first ray of light, countless living beings began to awaken under the warmth of new laws. At the edge of a boundless blue sea, beside a remote bronze stone pillar, stood a white-tailed youth in plain clothes. His hair was black. His expression was calm. Not far away, inside a palace, an eldest princess in a pale blue dress was walking through the crowd step by step. She looked proud, but her eyes were already drawn to him. When their gazes met, the ice and snow in the youth's eyes melted into waves. The princess's lips curved into the purest and most beautiful smile in the world. In that moment, time seemed to freeze. The wheel of fate began turning once again. This is our story. No matter how many epochs pass, no matter how many reincarnations we endure, my choice will always be you. And your remaining life will always be mine. That is eternity.